We need to make it a nonpartisan, like a people to people. Like, is there one person in this country that you can look at and say, you don't want clean water?
This is what gets me really excited. What would our state look like if we really, really went out and did this? Yeah. People would be more profitable, soils would be healthier, so we'd have less erosion. You can't lose with it.
We need to make accountability great again in agriculture, and I think that's ultimately what this conversation is about.
Welcome to the 396th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. In episode 395 of Ear to the Ground, we introduced you to the so-called Loeb Rangers, a trio of outspoken farmers who are utilizing soil-friendly practices to successfully raise corn and soybeans in north-central Iowa. As James Hepp, Matt Borman, and Zach Smith make clear in the first part of this two-part interview, they're extremely frustrated with the state of water quality in their home state, as well as throughout the Midwest. Despite years of publicly funded efforts to help farmers adopt water-friendly practices like cover cropping, no-till, and in-season fertilizer applications, ag-related pollution is worse than ever, with Midwestern cities like Des Moines, Iowa, struggling to deliver safe drinking water to residents on a consistent basis. For a time in 2025, ag pollution got so bad in the watershed that supplies that metro area that the Central Iowa Water Works was forced to ban lawn watering as its equipment struggled to keep up with filtering out nitrates. In January of this year, the Waterworks nitrate filtration system was activated as pollution levels spiked in the middle of winter. Despite the fact that the bulk of those nitrates originate from upstream crop fields that are receiving nitrogen fertilizer applications, groups like the Iowa Farm Bureau have issued statements saying water quality is actually improving in the state as a result of a purely voluntary, non-regulated based approach to controlling runoff. Such groups have a lot of political power and back the Environmental Protection Agency's decision in 2025 to rescind an order declaring 7 Iowa river segments as impaired. 2 of those rivers, the Des Moines and Raccoon, are major sources of drinking water for urban and suburban residents in central Iowa. As a result of the EPA's reversal, these rivers are no longer treated as exceeding the EPA's human health standard for nitrate levels, despite scientific evidence to the contrary. James, Matt, and Zach feel strongly that situations like this are proof that the voluntary approach to balancing crop productivity and clean water, a strategy pushed not only by mainstream farm groups, but the ag industry in general, as well as some policymakers, simply isn't working. It's time policies were put in place that required agriculture to be more accountable for the role it plays in landscape health, they argue. Of course, this sentiment runs counter to the narrative advanced by influential groups like the Iowa Farm Bureau, an organization all 3 farmers have been deeply involved in over the years. As I've mentioned before, Zach, James, and Matt represent an important voice in the debate about how to make Midwestern agriculture more resilient economically and environmentally. These are farmers who are committed to soil health, but are also very much reliant on producing the 2 row crops, corn and soybeans, that so many of their neighbors raise. They're proving that productive, profitable crop production can be carried out while building soil health and protecting our water. Ironically, although they aren't afraid to point out the often fraught relationship between farming and water quality, talking to these 3 can be a positive experience. In effect, their critiques come out of a desire to make a way of living they obviously love live up to its potential as something that can benefit the environment, the economy, and communities. In December 2025, I met with the Loeb Rangers in Matt's machine shed just a few miles from the east branch of the Des Moines River. While seated next to a few pieces of Matt's field equipment, we talked about the role regulation and government policy could play in developing a more regenerative approach to farming, and why most farmers are hesitant to speak out when it comes to what they're seeing happen on the land. We also discussed the so-called urban-rural divide and the Loeb Rangers' frustration with the approach mainstream farm groups are taking when it comes to water quality issues. It was a freewheeling, frank conversation that even included some advice from the great pro wrestler Jake the Snake Roberts. One note, At the start of this interview, James Hepp speaks first, followed by Zach Smith second, and Matt Borman third. Well, so one of the things that you guys have touched on so far is the voluntary approach is not working. And you've touched a little bit on regulation, that kind of thing, but that is like verboten to farmers for good reason. Very concerned about regulation and over-regulation. And I guess have you guys thought about what is, in the more short-term and long-term, what are some changes that we could be making? It's obvious policy plays a major role in how land is managed and how the relationship between agriculture and water. Have you thought about what some of the, I guess, policy changes, how could we get more farmers to be doing some of these things? And yeah, we got to talk about the elephant in the room, regulation, I guess.
I guess I would say that we have hit a brick wall with the voluntary. Like in today's world, I don't know how long, this stuff's been going on for 15 years, probably at least with cost share. I mean, there is a lot of money you can sign up for. And the money, they pay you to do things better, which makes you more money. So it's like double dipping. So I don't know if that doesn't get you excited to try it. And like I said, then it works. So if you're not doing it now, you're not going to do it. So policy is the only way to do it, which none of us want to see regulation, but it needs to be done because, like I said, there is just a lot of money and opportunity. Like at my NRCS office, my guy, he's always really good to me because I come in and quiz him and ask him stuff. He's like, I don't get anybody to sign up for this stuff. You know, like we've talked about even like cover crops. We figured there's maybe 1% to 2% tops in my county that has cover crops. And I'm probably one of the top 3 biggest guys with cover crops. And they're paying more. You can get a free cover crop basically if you do the right paperwork. And like I said, it helps you. Like I reduce a herbicide pass, this and that. I mean, and they won't even do it. So I don't know how else you incentivize people if money and performance doesn't get you excited. Not to mention just taking care of your fellow man and having a better environment for your kids and everything. I mean, that's what I have 2 boys and a girl on the way. So everything I do, I think about them. You know, where me 15 years ago, it's just the way it was. That's just, a lot of my college friends are that way even. We just deal with it. That's just, water's just getting bad. But I'm like, no, that's BS. We need to stop this and change it.
The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? And so for the last 15 years, every major leader in the state, from whatever industry group or politician, has just been emphatic about, you know, voluntary change is the best way to go, blah, blah, blah. Well, show me the data that suggests that. We have, like he says, we have reached a peak in that, and a lot of that is because, specifically, you know, there's a demographic that's more than likely to do that, and that's the demographic that we're in, which is a farm that's probably a single operator, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 acres, something like that. Once you get above that scale, it gets much more difficult to get those people interested in. So I think that the ceiling is probably 20% of the landscape, maybe not even that, about, you know, the people that would be open to this. And so in order for meaningful change to happen, the experts would state that we need to have 70 to 80% of the landscape using the practices like we're doing. We are so far from that, it's not even funny. And so this idea that the demographics are going to come to it, it's stated by people, and quite frankly, I'm just going to say they're cowards, and they're being intellectually dishonest with the facts and what the trends have been. And so what we need is leadership in these groups to be able to call a spade and come with policy ideas that would actually shift the narrative so that we would have change on 70 to 80%. So you would actually see a difference in nitrate levels in the Raccoon River or the Des Moines River that the people in Des Moines are rightfully, concerned about.
Well, I think one thing too is that there's farmers that are doing practices and there's farmers that aren't. The problem is that you don't have to do any of the practices. And I see, especially in the ag groups, they parade around the farmers that are doing the right thing, and they are. And you get to different parts of the state. Like, you travel east, you get east of I-35 and you start traveling, there's less tillage, there's more cover crops than what's in the lobe where we farm. It's more of a cultural deal, and they've had to do more of that because they have higher slopes, there's more HEL, highly erodible land. You get down into southern Iowa, there's more ponds and more conservation. So then what happens is that we're up here in the lobe saying we're not seeing any progress, and you're talking to friends that you have in other parts of the state, they're like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm surrounded by cover crops. I'm surrounded by no-till. Like, you communists, stop saying this kind of stuff. And it's like, then they drive up, you might get together on a weekend and they drive up and they're like, holy crap, did you see that farm blowing? It's drifting the ditch shut. Like, what is going on there? Holy crap. Like, I'm seeing this going on, I'm seeing that going on. What's unfortunate is that pits the volunteer guys versus, we're seeing more damage going on up here than what they're seeing in other parts of the state.
Is there a couple specific pieces of regulation that you think would maybe have an impact in the short term or long term or in the immediate future?
I guess I would say, starting off simple, like our USDA NRCS has incredibly low expectations. They get excited over like 2% cover crop. But then I also look at the education piece. If you want to go to my county, you just go sign up. There's no education. They don't say, okay, Billy Bob, what do you want cover crops for? Are you for scavenging? Are you for herbicide? I mean, it's just, here's your $25. Thank you. Where we all have to go set through those painful pesticide applicator classes that arguably you don't learn much besides wear gloves and goggles, but you have to pay and go to it. So there's a lot of easy things we could do that are just pure education. Like, okay, if you're going to do this, let's educate you. Did you know no-till, you can do this, strip till this. I mean, just easy, like local education, but there's none. There's just absolutely none.
Yeah.
So like I said, we need to keep our expectations higher. And then you have like the Secretary of Ag on the radio every day talking about how we're just booming with cover crops and these bioreactors are just great. But it's not realistic. Those bioreactors, they're really expensive. And if you could get guys to drop 20, 30 pounds of nitrogen easy, you would reduce way more nitrogen than any of those reactors. Like I've told these guys with those reactors, instead of, right now we're putting bulletproof vests on everybody. Why don't we take the bullets out of the gun? Yeah. Like those reactors cost a lot, and in 10 years you dig them up. After you're just able to farm the ground again, you got to put new wood chips in. But there's not anybody in this state that probably couldn't take 20 pounds off their nitrogen. I would almost guarantee it. And you know what do the math on that. It'd be huge, and it would cost you nothing. But there's no education, and it's not localized. Like I said, we're forced to do all this other stuff, but there's zero.
Can you briefly explain the bioreactor to a listener if they're not familiar with it?
So I don't have one. There's a few people. Basically, they take they dig up a portion of your farm. They find like a lower spot where your intakes run to, and you guys can correct me, but I think they cut it. They dig a great big basin, and they basically put a liner and fill it with wood chips. The thought is the water flows in, and then the wood chips help take out the nitrate, or reduce the nitrate, and then it flows out.
Okay.
So it's like a big filter, kind of like a diaper almost. They're expensive, but they're showy. But it just burns me every time you're on the radio. They're talking about, we have so many bioreactors. Yeah, it's great, but that's just one. Like me in my area, you'd have to go, 6 miles before you hit a field that's a no-till or cover crop probably. So even though I'm doing literally everything humanly possible and scientifically possible in my acres, my neighbors are doing the absolute opposite. So it's like, even me, I'm doing everything as possibly right as I can, but I'm not even making a blip on the radar.
Well, the reason the politicians talk about that stuff, because it's popular with farmers, because it doesn't require them to do anything. They don't change the way they farm. We're just going to put this diaper, like James says, on the end of the tile before it dumps in the ditch, instead of changing the reason that we need the diaper in the first place.
Yeah, where's it coming from?
It's like not instead of potty training your child, just keep putting diapers on them, I guess.
Yeah, that's but because it doesn't, and it's easy for them, because then the farmer doesn't get wound up, because the politician or the industry leader person isn't saying something that might offend the way that they.
Yeah. Is there any other regulations that would be, I guess, palatable to folks?
No, none of this stuff is going to be palatable. I'm just going to cut in and get to the chase here on what if you're somebody that wants to know what would change, arrive at meaningful change, and I'm going to be beating this drum all winter long when I talk to people, because I'm sick of people pussyfooting around and not getting to what would actually change things. We're going to need to have a tax on some of these issues, and is that going to be politically viable, or what's the reaction going to be from the farming class? It's going to be an allergic reaction. I understand that. But the money talks and bullshit walks in this business, unfortunately. If you want to, what is the problem, in my opinion? The problem is we've talked about the whole podcast. We front load way too much nitrogen way too early. There's no consequence to that. There are external costs to that for other people, crop insurance, all of these things. So until we tax the poor behavior and put a financial incentive for people to change, and not a ban. I don't think bans are good, because we need to give people time. It shouldn't be 20 years. Maybe it's a 5-year window, and maybe it's a tax that starts small and builds up to incentivize people over time to change. But there needs to be a tax on any application of nitrogen ahead of the 31st of March, prior to the crop year. That would be one thing specifically that could make a huge dent. And actually, would be at a meaningful level where you could maybe, I mean, and it would have to be significant. It'd have to have something to have teeth. Maybe with anhydrous, it would be hundreds of dollars a ton. That would have to be assessed by a retailer to do that. But if you want to see people stop front loading, it's going to have to cost them more to do it rather than just the easy button and be the cheapest form of nitrogen like fallen hydrous has been.
No gain without pain. Look, I mean, I'm just as guilty. I don't change unless something hurts or, like, well, that sucked. I should probably not do that. So there's got to be pain. And there's sensible, easy ways to do it. Like, I had some people touring our farms, and I showed our landlord's field that he grew rye on. So we combined that in like July. So it was like the only open field in Calhoun County. And with all the rain, we had a local hog barn that was getting up to the slats. So it had water in it. So they're like, hey, can we apply manure? Well, thankfully, we had a cover crop growing at the time. We had probably about a 6-8 inch cover crop growing after the rye harvest. It was oats, rye, camelina, peat, a whole bunch of stuff in there. So they came and they applied the manure, and now that cover crop is like that. And, that cover crop costs like $30. And I took tests this fall. I'm going to take tests in the spring of the biomass, like what's in the cover crop, and we'll do a soil test too. But I'm quite confident that is going to hold almost all that manure, because of just the way it holds it. I mean, it's thick. I mean, it looks like we drilled a cover crop. There's a $30 deal. So if you're going to apply hog manure, I know, like, so we can't get away with hog. We don't want to do away with hogs. We can't do away with manure. It just goes with hogs. But a realistic say, hey, if you're going to do it, you need a cover crop. It needs to be a good cover crop, so people need to check it, which I don't know how you would do that. You can't just throw oats out November 1st and say, oh, I planted a cover crop, never grew. So it needs to be a good, solid cover crop. And if you did that, that would promote a lot, because then you'd need more guys growing seed, which would be profitable, good for the land. That'd allow other guys to sell seed, so it'd be good for the communities, and have more local. Because there's, like in my area, you can't go 2-3 miles without seeing a hog barn. So if you can imagine all the seed, cover crop seed and the application you would need, put a cover crop down, it's going to scavenge all those nutrients and have the right mix. So to me, that would be an easy button fix. So that's what we need, more common sense things, which right now don't have to, don't want to.
Well, I think we've clarified that the policy plays a major role in this. I mean, everything from crop insurance to kind of just the whole commodity system promoting this duoculture or monocultural system.
Well, right now, Brian, society pays the bill on everything. Society pays the bills on bridge payments. Society pays the bills on crop insurance. Society pays the bill on disaster payments. And now we've got society paying the bill for the industry to do better practices. Like, what other industry is society supposed to pay the bill on? What, the restaurant industry that they want to do? Why is it everybody else that's supposed to pay for what we're doing out here? Like, let's try to generate that is an option to generate the funds with with agriculture generates its own funds. Mm-hmm. And then maybe it's a pool that if you're putting on nitrogen too early, you're paying into the system. And if you're wanting to, buy Y drops and, get a business going with a high boy New Holland or a Hagie sprayer that you can do something, that really is doing something better, you can draw from the pot of money doing it. I mean, we've already got the incentives, that they're trying to pay people to do better practices anyhow. The more that we talk about all this, and we talk, just the ag groups and the press talking about, okay, all the practices that make soil and water quality better, right? Well, the more we talk about it, the more we're admitting that we have a problem and there's stuff we can do about it.
Right.
So there's no way of escaping this conundrum that we're in. We're going to have to attack it head on if we're going to do something about it. And one thing that bugs me too is that I have had a lot of conversations with farmers that say, I'm not going to do anything until I'm regulated. And some of those very farmers are working with and showing up doing stuff with the commodity or the farm groups that are trying to prevent them from being regulated. So where's the responsibility in that? Like, how do you say I'm not doing anything until they make me? How can you go sit on your Farm Bureau board or be a corn grower or a soy, whatever it is? Yeah. I'm not throwing any of them under the bus, but how can you sit there and say both things? Like, you're supposed to stay home and drink beer rather than doing either of the two, right?
Yeah. What role, so we talk about policy, but what role do markets play in this? Because the markets really now reward corn and beans in this part of the country. But what do you see any opportunities for the market situation to help diversify the landscape and make it more soil friendly?
I mean, eventually, yeah, but unfortunately, we talked about this oat plant we're investing in.
Yeah, the Green Acres plant.
The Green Acres plant,
Yeah.
which is awesome. I'm proud to be a part of it, but that stands to maybe impact, 40 or 50,000 acres worth of land that'll be a market. I mean, that's been a Herculean effort to get that
Yeah.
off. We would need to replicate that 100 times across, Iowa to make a meaningful difference. And so a lot of people talk, I go to a lot of these, committee meetings or, things that people are talking about how to solve this. It would be great if we could get a ton of, diversity of markets and create new things. But the reality is right now, the way the Farm Bill is written and probably will be written again, we're going to be corn and bean country. And while I would love to do all of those things and completely diversify the state back to like what we had in the 50s or the 60s when we were probably more stable from an ecological standpoint, that's not the reality. And if all we do is talk about the hopes and dreams of getting back to that versus dealing with the reality of today and the issues we have in the system, today, we're going to miss, really what the core issue is.
Right.
And hoping for 30 years that we develop these markets. There's a ton we can, do in the next 5 to actually get on this stuff.
There's all kinds of ways that this could be done. Do you tie conservation to crop insurance? Do you tie conservation and better nutrient placement to a tax? Do you, 45Z was, using carbon intensity scoring to score how you produced your grain, and it was gonna be a part of the sustainable aviation fuel, and that whole deal is kind of stalled out. And what always bothered me about that was, of course, that started out, it was kind of a Biden era thing. So then you watch all the Republican politicians get mad about it. It's like, well, all you politicians, I'm going to stay. Everybody's partisan in some way. Like you want voluntary conservation. So this was a program that would pay you, to use less, apply your nitrogen better, use less tillage, and use cover crops. And it got met with like all this resistance. And it's like, well, it checks all the boxes of what we're promoting. Plus, everybody says we need better markets and we need higher prices for grain. Like, government's paying for everything. I'm now in the camp, well, government's pay. I could go both ways, Brian. I could be one that says get government completely out of it or have government be involved with it. Like, government's involved in every aspect of our lives anyhow. We're looking at a Republican president right now. I've got more government involvement than I've ever seen. I always thought and I am a Republican, I always thought being Republican meant less government. I'm watching more payouts and blame it on whatever you want to blame it on. But like, why don't we have some teeth to some of this stuff? Or we could maybe there's an accreditation process. Like we need to be doing something. I had sketched out an outline a couple of years ago of 12 credit hours a year that a farmer would have to take, not being tested, but 4 hours of training in fertilizer and nitrogen management, 4 hours of seed and chemical management and herbicide management, because we're all told that our pesticides are getting less efficacious or they're less effective. The traits are becoming less effective, and 4 credit hours in soil and water quality. But whatever anybody comes up with, it's all met with resistance. No matter what we're going to say on this podcast, it's going to get met with resistance. But we got to keep trying because we're not meeting the marks that need to get met.
I think all three of you have had involvement we were talking about farm groups, commodity groups, and I think you've all been involved with like the Iowa Farm Bureau.
Yep.
Yeah. First of all, maybe describe your involvement with them, and then talk about I know you're very upset about kind of this feeling that they are at the least doing virtue signaling, as you put it, Zach, kind of saying, yeah, we're all in favor of this as long as it's voluntary. But on the worst end, they're maybe opposing any kind of steps that could be taken to get at the problem. But maybe talk about your involvement, and you guys have kind of been held up as the poster boys of
Yeah.
conservation and all that, which is great, makes everybody feel good, but in the end, it's a lot of good public relations, a little bit of greenwashing, frankly.
I joined it, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago. I got asked by our local president, who is a great farmer. He does a lot of the things that we're talking about, and he came on and he's like, I'd really like you to talk about this conservation, piece. And so I'd like, what a great way to influence this stuff, because I'm passionate about Farm Bureau is one of the most powerful forces in agriculture. And I joined and attempted to do that, but found out really quickly it was more about having, I think, somebody to take pictures with, showing here's somebody doing conservation, rather than when you go to the meetings or you have the input sessions. It kind of just fell on deaf ears, when you're in the meetings and such. I did it for, I think, 3 years, and then I decided this is a waste of my time, and I decided to step away. There are a lot of good people that are in Farm Bureau. I'm not going to sit here and bash on everyone, but there are a lot of good people in Farm Bureau that know what we're talking about on this podcast is 100% true, but they fail to do anything about it, and so that's my comments on that.
So I joined Farm Bureau about 10 years ago when I moved back after college. Never really thought, because at that point I wasn't farming. So I'm a first generation farmer. I've been farming like 7 or 8 years now. So I joined 10 years ago. I was real pro ag, like, yeah, we're doing the best we can. All the haters, go away. You want to eat? Like, I had that attitude like everybody. And I'm like Zach and Matt probably. You go to this stuff and it falls on deaf ears. And it's just like sheep. They just want to keep doing what they've always done and have different results, like what you were saying with insanity. And it's really frustrating. I've served as our county president for 3 years and vice president for a couple of years. So I've been fairly high up and got like their Young Leader Award and stuff. And they come out and look at the conservation stuff and take pictures and stuff. And you become poster child like Matt was also. And it gets frustrating because no one else does it. And even the higher ups, like with this waterworks, I've gotten close with some of the people at the waterworks since my field days. And I talked directly to some really high up with Farm Bureau and said, hey, why don't we do a trip? You got to go. Every county sends so many people to, like, Des Moines Waterworks, for instance, see it. Because I thought I knew a lot. When I went to Des Moines Waterworks, I was blown away. Like, wow. Like, I kind of knew we were the problem, but then when I left, and they were nice about it. They're really nice about it. And I said, we should really make people, because I'm pretty well versed and I learned a lot. So the average Joe would learn even more. I said, let's make people go down there, tour it. They're happy to do it. They want to do it. And then after that, I have a friend out in Maryland that farms on the Chesapeake Bay, and he's farmed since the 90s when they cleared up and basically did what Zach was saying, like, no, there's nothing applied after, I think it's like September till like March or something like that. And they cleaned up the bay big time. And when he started farming, he was farming when that happened. And he told me, I thought it was the end of the world. We'll never do it. He's like, now we're growing so much better crops, we're making more money. It's unreal. He's like, I wouldn't ever dream about going back to it. And I talked to him and I said, if we got a group of like, say 100 people, one person from every county come out, oh yeah, he's like, I got a shop, we entertain, stuff like that, I could set you up, no problem. And I told him that, and they're like, well, we could maybe get it on the list in a couple years. I'm like, well, I think we need to be proactive, because this water work, the pitchforks are coming out and the torches are getting lit and people are getting angry. I called them about every 2 weeks, just kept bugging them about it. And then the one guy said, well, if we went out there, the media would get a hold of it. And if the media got a hold of it, and then we came home and changed, that would be admitting we're wrong. So that was his biggest concern, which I'm like, really? That's what you took out of this conversation? Who cares if you're wrong? I mean, change is never fun, but most of the time change involves progress. Progress involves profitability. Like going from moldboard plowing to ripping. When you went to ripping, you could do a lot more in an hour, probably less fuel or the same amount of fuel. You go from ripping to no-till. Obviously, that's pretty economical. So I'm like, really? So I think that really highlights what everybody's attitude. Like Zach said, there are a lot of good people, but they're kind of afraid to get out of their lane. And I'm like, no, this is BS. Like, this is my farm, and we need to make it a nonpartisan, like a people to people. Like, is there one person in this country that you can look at and say, do you want clean water? You don't want clean water? It's like, we have to change. It's not just going to change. This isn't just natural. Nitrate levels have gone up. It's like, so it's really frustrating. So like I said, there are a lot of good people, but the higher ups, they don't want change, and they've kind of become bureaucracies, and they don't want the swamp drained. And so I'm kind of taking a back seat now, and I'll probably get blacklisted now, probably. I won't be their poster child, but it's just someone needs to stand up. Otherwise, we'll be dealing with the same problems 20 years ago. I'm more of the show me. You can talk all you want, but what have you done? What are you doing? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
We don't need a lip service. Like, what have you done?
This is what gets me really excited. What would our state look like if we really, really went out and did this?
Yeah.
I mean, we could really clean shit up.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be incredible. People would be more profitable, soils would be healthier, so we'd have less erosion. And the profitability thing, like you can't lose with it. But you were asking about Farm Bureau too. I was 14 years I spent on our county Farm Bureau board. I've been out for about 4 years now. I served the role as vice president, president, and I spent a lot of time as a voting delegate. And a voting delegate is you're the head person in the county that goes to the state level to do the voting. So you're the fiduciary for your county. And I would say, talking with a lot of other voting delegates down there in voting delegate sessions, that about the most you could get on board was about 40 to 45% of the voting delegates. They know down there that there's a problem. And there's a lot of really good people that are on their SWCDs and that are real good leaders in the community that understand what needs to go on. But what you need to understand about Farm Bureau is that it is still ran by farmers. So then when you go back to your county Farm Bureaus, is there 99 or 100 in Iowa?
There's 100, I think Pot County has 2.
There's 100 county Farm Bureaus. And when you get down to it, they don't want to be regulated and they don't want this to happen. The Farm Bureau policy is pure. So it's not, there's some people that argue that it's influenced by industry. I was in it for 14 years. It's influenced by the farmers on the land that don't want to see change. I want you to know they're not necessarily bad people on these county boards. They've had experiences that they don't like. There's some of the very people that say I'm not going to get regulated unless I have to. So I will say on the state Farm Bureau board, there's leadership there that are doing a lot of this stuff and that know that something needs to get changed. But what are they going to do? They're fiduciaries for the overall policy of Farm Bureau, and the overall policy, what gets drafted in those sessions is that we want voluntary conservation. So then their mission and their goal, along with their PR, public relations team and media sources, is to go out there and say, rah, 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 we just got a new bioreactor in Kossuth County, problem solved. And it's not solved.
Is there other farmers that feel the same way you folks do? I get the sense that you feel a little isolated, but you also say there are other farmers out there who, and if there are, why aren't they willing to maybe make some changes, but also maybe speak out a little bit about this?
I would say there are, and it's growing. Like in my short time in agriculture, I was always kind of like a hippie when I started out because I thought, man, no-till, strip-till, cover crops, this just makes sense. And I used to go to events like the Big Soil Health and some of those deals, and I remember the first one I went to, I think there was like 50 people at it. All these meetings were in small rooms, and now in the last 2 years, there's a couple hundred people at like some of these meetings.
Yeah.
Like you go to some of these conferences, so it's growing. But I think a lot of people don't want to say anything, or they think, well, I'll just keep doing the best I can on my acres, which is great, and you should keep doing that. But like my instance, I'm like in a sea of black, they call it. Like you could fly over and see my fields probably from an airplane down low in my area. It's all black and then corn stalks are green. Like I said, it's great you're doing what you can, but we need to get everybody to do these things. And then like Matt talked about profitability too earlier, that's another reason why the next generation, like I think we're going to run out of farmers in the next 15 years because there's no profitability. Who's going to trade in a job in Des Moines to come and borrow $500,000-600,000 a year to put a crop in, and then you got to pay for all the equipment and all that, and then we might not make any money. Like why would you? And then throw in you work a lot of extra hours. So if you do these practices and get things better, we can all be better. You have more people on the land, more people in the schools, businesses. Everything's struggling now. It's only going to get worse, like fire departments and stuff.
Yeah.
It's hard. I'm on our volunteer, and somehow we barely keep our 25-guy roster, but it's a struggle. And in 10 years, half them guys are going to be old enough, they'll be retired. But who's going to replace them?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the reason that people aren't willing to speak out is because they have other interests that may conflict with that. If you have a business, if you're, say, like I used to be a seed dealer, and I always kind of felt like I was kind of muffled because if I spoke out of turn and I offended people that were buttering my bread, then I'm going to lose business or I'm going to be a poor representation on the company I'm representing and hurting them. And that's a real thing, you know,
Yeah.
or you farm with other family members that don't get along with you. You might be cutting off your nose to spite your face with the people in your own organization. And so I tell this, you know, specifically to Matt all the time, like Matt and I are same age. We're both completely independent. We don't have any masters. And I remember having masters, and that's a whole different dynamic. So I completely empathize with people in the situations they have that where they don't feel like they might agree with us, but they don't feel they have the need to publicly speak out. And it's a privilege to be in the spot we are in, and I think it's a responsibility to say what is true if you're not encumbered, you know, by that. And let's be honest, if you're going to be farming and you're under the age of, you know, say, you know, 45, 50 years old, you're probably going to have an off-farm job, unless your circumstances are such that don't require that. And if you're doing that, that has a whole other set of baggage that comes with it. And so I think that herd mentality, the societal, cultural pressure of don't rock the boat, things are going good, let's keep it in the lane type of deal. I think that's a real part of why people are afraid of maybe talking more openly about this stuff.
There's stuff anymore that you just can't talk about with people that you used to be able to talk about. Like, it's like the herd mentality of, like, if you're all in for Trump or you are all in for Kamala Harris or Biden or whatever you are in for, like, it's like if you're not with them, you're against them. Like, can't we just talk about stuff? I've got friends now that they're on all sides of the political spectrum, and it's really awesome right now. We just talk about anything, but just check the bias at the door, and let's just have it out.
People to
You know,
people.
People to people. But you asked about farmers, you know, not speaking up. They're scared. They're worried about what somebody's going to think too. Another thing that always bounces around in your head as a farmer is, what if I piss off the next landowner that it could rent from or buy from or whatever? Okay, let me walk through that psychology with a lot of people. The landowner that's renting to the mega farmer, you know, for $500+ an acre or whatever stupid number it is, you are never ever going to get to rent that anytime, anywhere, anyhow. These type landowners, birds of a feather kind of flock together. So what's meant to be is going to be meant to be. So I would quit worrying about that and just speak your mind on it, because you probably are going to attract a landowner that you actually want to work with anyhow. And once you start not worrying about some of that stuff, just remember, a lot of these people that you think that you're going to rent from or whatever it is, it's never going to happen anyhow. So focus on what makes your farm profitable. And if you got a few things to say, I mean, you don't have to go on a podcast, but speak your mind. I'm also finding, though, too, that I am getting a lot of farmers, too. As irritated as I get at this, I'm having some really good conversations also. You know, a few of them, a couple guys this fall, they look like they got attacked by raccoons. They look older and worn out, and they're only a few years older than me, and they're really, really good guys. And they are trying to till and anhydrous, and they're just trying to do all this stuff and farm more ground, and their bodies are wearing out. And they're really good dudes. And they're, you know, one of them is like, how many acres did your brother strip till the other day? Did he get that quarter done? I'm like, no, he did 300 acres. And the phone was just silence. And I'm like, you can do it too, dude. Well, come and let's try one on your farm. Like, you're complaining about the tracks on your quad track are worn out. Your ripper is worn out. You're spending all this money on diesel fuel. Like, you're watching us. You border us. We're willing to help you. Like, I'm not going to beg you to do this, you know, and then I just kind of drop it from there. It's like, yeah, I know, you're right. And then you watch them do the same thing. And it's so frustrating to watch when you know that you can help somebody.
So every year I have a field day. I get 60, 70, 80 people. I've had up to 80 at my farm. And we talk about ROI, conservation, cover crops, all the unpopular stuff. And I bring in speakers and stuff. And I bet 5 to 7 people maybe are within 10 miles of my house that come to it. First time I was kind of horrified and like, wow, really? Thanks, guys. Like, I invited people. They still didn't. I mean, they had every excuse in the book. Right. Of course, a lot of them drove by too, which is funny. And then the whole yard's full of trucks or whatever. But so I understand. I mean, like I said, I have people saying, like on a dry year, boy, I bet you wish you wouldn't have no-tilled those soybeans. Like, no, I'm quite happy I no-till. Like, so, but they're watching, and we're living rent-free in these people's heads, but they just don't want to. And it gets frustrating too. Like, I don't have all the answers, but together we could have them. Mm-hmm. Like, let's work together. I think landlords get kind of skipped over. You know, I have some friends that, was it last year? I had one guy, I was eating breakfast at the truck stop, and I knew him, and he came over, and he's like, you do a lot of no-till? I went, yeah, and we talked for a while, and he's like, boy, I no-tilled some corn this last year. That's the best corn I've ever had. And he farms like 4,000 acres.
Wow.
I'm like, well, why did you do that? I was like, whoa, I about fell off my chair. He's like, well, got too wet, couldn't do it. The landlord was gone, so I just send it, And he's like, it was so firm and nice, and he's like, it looked like crap. Like it come up, but it looked bad because he had all the bean stuff, because it's black and green, looks pretty. I'm like, oh, so you're going to do it next year? Oh, no. The landlord said if I do that again, I lose the farm. So I'm like, so what about other acres? Oh, same way. He's like, I'll just lose the farm. So that's really frustrating. So I think sometimes the landlords I think the farmer gets all the blame, and they probably should take most of it. I mean, I've literally had people very close say, I love what you're doing. I wish we could do it. I'm like, you can. What do you mean? Well, Bob's farmed this for 30 years, and we don't want him to change. And it's like, it's your farm. Like, if you went to a body shop and said, paint my car red, and they painted it yellow, would you be upset? Like, you should be able to listen to you.
Right.
So there's that mentality, too. And so I think a lot of landowners, I think they don't know what they can do, because I've come into a lot I actually get landlords coming to my field days and asking really good questions. And like, so we can do this? Like, yeah. Now, and I always tell them, be logical. Like, you can't say next year you got to be all strip till, no till. Like, give them like 3-year window and say, in 2 years, I want all the beans no tilled. In another 2 years, so 4 or 5 years, I won't start doing strip till.
Right.
Like, that's reasonable. And if you don't want to, thank you for what you've done. We're going to find somebody else. Like, you can do that. And then, like, some of these people, there's probably a lot of people down, like, in Des Moines that own land in my area. In fact, I know it. And their farmers are the ones that are making 2-3 tillage passes. So they're the ones complaining about water. But I'm like, your share of the blame, too. And I've said that to a few people, and they didn't really like that. But it's true. You own the land. I mean, yeah, you rent it, but you have a say in it.
We didn't talk about this in the policy portion of this, but I think it's a perfect opportunity because he's 100% right on this, is that there needs to be policy that has the landowners on the hook as far as how they allow their ground to be managed. And a lot of people don't like that. Well, it's my ground, I'll do whatever you want. But I think about things in a long-term time frame. And, there's the Indian proverb that, we don't own the land, we borrow it from our grandchildren or something. And that is 100% true. And so the short-term mindset that we're here just to run a strip mine operation here in Iowa, we have the best soils in the world. We need to have policy that helps maybe remind people about what our mindset maybe should be about leaving it in better shape than what we found it. And I've got ideas about what those policies could be, but it's going to have to be something where, if your tax bill is higher because of you're letting your tenant let everything run down the hill or not have waterways or, some of these things, that would change.
You should be responsible.
That would change behavior in a real quick way at a major level on a percentage basis. Is it going to be politically popular? Oh, hell no.
No.
People will be screaming from the rooftops.
Yeah.
But, again, it's back to this point is, do we want a virtue signal and make things that are really, really tiny bites that don't ever amount to anything over 100 years? Mm-hmm. Or do you actually want to solve the problem? Those are two completely different.
It's got to hurt to make it change.
Yep.
Path
of least resistance. That's what we take.
Brian, the great professional wrestler Jake the Snake Roberts once said, the only reason people don't understand where we are going is because they don't understand where we've been. And he did this cameo with Macho Man Randy Savage. It was incredible. From like 1990. People are worried. Yep, we've talked about the change. But look at what you can create in a farming operation. You're sitting in my shop right now. There's not a bunch of tillage tools that need to get worked on. There's not a bunch of, we have eliminated so much bullshit that we don't have to deal with. And it results in profitability. All these things, you start adding it up, it starts resulting in profitability where I don't have to have, my wife works off farm, but we're not looking at a family dynamic where everybody's working all these different jobs and trying to hold everything together. And I watch so many farmers, they don't have a reason why. They just do it. Well, the neighbor's doing it, I should do it that way. Well, why don't you look at your operation and start figuring out what you could do of all these things? And then they all start adding up. That's where we've been. We've been here now that we can say this stuff like Jake the Snake because we've done it. And it works. And that makes it so frustrating for us because you see what someone else could have, that level of happiness, a debt load that you can get these debt loads down better by making better decisions with not taking some of the opportunities I'm saying with certain landowners and trying to do a better job on what you're existingly farming and maybe farming with smaller equipment and you get to the end of the year, holy crap, maybe this year you didn't make anything, but you didn't lose anything and paid yourself a little bit of money, maybe wife brought in off-farm income, and you're rolling, rather than this constant talk about banking. Anytime I'm in a conversation with a farmer and they lead with my banker, my banker, my banker this, my banker that, I immediately know that, some of them, they're about to do something really cool. They're going to maybe buy something that's really going to make a difference on the farm. But a lot of them, it's like, holy shit, what are they going to tell me about what the banker's telling them that they may or may not get financing? That is, if you're sitting here now in December of 2025 and you can't get financing to move forward, there were decisions that got made in the last several years that brought you to, it's not a Trump problem, it's not a Biden problem, it's or China problem. You're going to have to figure out what you're going to do to survive in this industry, and it's get more efficient with what you're doing, with the way you spend your money on nutrients, seed, all that stuff, and how you allocate your capital, and all these tools that result in better water quality result in better profitability.
Anytime we can reference Jake the Snake, I appreciate it. As a kid who grew up watching All-Star Wrestling. I guess let's dream a little bit. And you guys have touched on this, and your examples are kind of show this a little bit too, some of the things that you guys are doing on your own farms. But for a non-farmer especially, who is very concerned about water quality, very interested in what the landscape looks like, maybe they're also very interested in rural economic development and seeing these rural communities thrive. What would be an ideal, water-friendly farm out there? What would be in the future? What would it look like? I also would call it a soil-friendly farm because I think those things go hand in hand.
Well, I think the biggest thing, you need to have an active living root or plant year-round no matter what. So that would involve cover crops of some fashion, which if you do cover crops, you have greatly reduced tillage. And then long-term, splitting applied nitrogen, just being more manageable. Like it's a lot of work. It's not easy. I mean, there's weeks when I'm running out taking sap tests on Mondays and the corn I'm soaked. I'm like, boy, why am I doing this? Really sucks. But, there's been years where I saved 30, 40 grand in nutrients because, if I went with the Hefties or Co-op way or what my tests say, didn't apply it, same yield. We did trials, same yield. Without the nutrients. So I think just trying and being open-minded and just friendly to the public too. I think in the last 10 years, farmers have kind of put up a wall around non-farm people. And I think we just need to be open-minded and transparent. I think transparency is never a bad thing. And just show people stuff. Like this is how we do it. This is why we do it. Mm-hmm. You have a question. I welcome people all the time that'll ask questions, and there is no dumb questions. So work together. We're all better together. I keep saying that. Like the three of us by ourselves aren't any good, but together we're all better and we all learn. We all need to work. Like I said, the people in the city, they'll come up with ideas we didn't think of. I guarantee it. Do
you think sometimes there's this concerted effort to create a division between, say, farmers, environmentalists, or even just people who aren't even considered environmentalists, but just non-farmers?
I want to take this one. I think there's a concerted effort to create the divide. The ag groups are the ones creating the divide because they issue, and some of our political leaders in this state, it's like I hear about this urban ag divide, and the public needs to know that it's going to take a lot of time to make these changes. When the public sees studies that state, like I said earlier, about corn growers and soybean and reducing nitrates by 45% with proper application of when the crop needs it and with cover crops, but the divide is being created by those in the industry that are trying to defend the industry, and I call it farming nationalism. How dare you dare to question a farmer? Well, how can you not question the farmer? What are we getting in 2025 from federal assistance? It's $75 to $100 an acre, roughly, I want to say is what I'm up to. And with all the stuff I'm getting. Like how is the public's got every right to ask us questions about what we do. The public's got every right to ask, when they come up into north central Iowa and you're smelling hog manure from September until mid-November, ask some questions. And then, Mr. Farmer, tell us why you're doing what you're doing. There's merit to what you're doing. They want to know what's going on. And the environmental groups are pushing to get better at, I know some of the environmental groups, and I don't think that they want to get rid of farming. I think we're plighting the two extremes in the ag groups versus the extremes and the environmental groups and acting like there's a war going on. There isn't. They care about their farmers. The environmental groups care about the farmers, and they know that they need to be profitable. So let's talk about ways to make it profitable. And the farmers and the ag groups are going to have to start thinking about, what if there's a consortiated effort against them saying, here's the science, why aren't you doing it? Here's the water tests, why aren't you doing it? Like, we just can't keep saying the same stuff. Oh, well, it's going to take years to get this to happen.
You know, the thing about this issue is it's not a partisan issue. I think a lot of people try to make it one, but water quality impacts everyone the same way. If your family member has cancer right now, it doesn't care what color you are. And to me, I could see candidates from both sides of the aisle coming to this issue and grasping to it, because there are a lot of constituents that are really upset, and just, you know, being in the denial camp could be very, very costly, I think, moving forward in this state. And one party sure doesn't own it, because neither of the parties in the state of Iowa have really done anything about it in the past. So there's a huge opportunity, I think, for whoever has the intestinal fortitude to stand up and actually and lean on farmers like us that are willing to tell you how it is. You know, we're not nutcases. It's not like we're, some kind of special cause out here. We're successful in our operations doing this stuff, and there is a pathway to make all this stuff better. And so you ask, what do we dream about? Like, to me, I dream about a time where people look at this where it has no type of party affiliation or no politics behind it. It's just, how do we make Iowa better? How do we leave it in a better place than we found it? There's a long pathway to probably get in my idea. For me, it would be more people out on the land, more integration of livestock, farmers getting back to more independence than being with the hogs or the chicken example, where you're essentially you're just a chore taker. For the integrators, that's not the way. When I grew up, everybody, had hogs. They were the mortgage lifters, and you were an independent farmer. You didn't have a field man telling you how to raise your pigs. The same thing is coming to the crop stuff soon. I'd like to just see a reversal of the elimination of independence and elimination of farmers thinking critically. I think that's another thing we didn't talk about, but I think that's happening, is just give me the easy button. Just pay me for my acre space. And I think we need to get back where farmers are thinking critically about what they're doing and being open to these things, and farmers being the innovative, group that I felt like they really used to be, more so than what they are today. That's what I think about for the future.
Well, the thinking critically part, like Zach said too, young farm kids that leave Iowa State or University of Minnesota or wherever they go, they are learning how to think critically, and they are learning about cover crop, strip till. They're learning about all that stuff. And then when they get home, they're up against a brick wall with a family operation or a landlord or whatever it is saying that they can't do it. So another argument I hear is that the universities aren't teaching this stuff. They are teaching this stuff. And it's really hard for a young person to come back and try to do all that stuff. But for me, yeah, if my utopia would be more cover crops, better nutrient placement, stop tilling the crap out of everything, and I just think a lot of this stuff would get a lot better with water, soil and water quality and profitability. It's really pretty simple. Profitability would get better too. Just got to open up the mind and get into it.
Yeah, it really, and we started this conversation talking about cultural changes and peer pressure, and it does kind of come down to that. Once you can get to that tipping point where a certain number of people are doing these things who are respected in the community, and they see, oh, yeah, that's working. The world didn't come to an end. In fact, they're actually doing a little bit better. Then it can have that, like they said, there is a tipping point, I think, where people start to, especially, frankly, younger generation.
We need to make accountability great again in agriculture, and I think that's ultimately what this conversation is about.
The first part of this interview is available on episode 395 of LSP's Ear to the Ground podcast. For links to some of the research cited in this interview, and for more information on the relationship between healthy soil and clean water, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 396 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. By the way, it helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell Tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.